Welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Fraser Jackson. Here are the stories making headlines this evening. Monday was Gender Day at the COP27 climate summit in Egypt, with women in the global south disproportionately feeling the effects of climate change. We'll ask what can be done to reduce the gender gap. The blockage on Ethiopia's northern Tigray region may have been lifted, but millions of locals are still waiting for aid to reach them. We'll get an update from our regional correspondent. And the FIFA World Cup gets underway in Qatar this Sunday. As anticipation builds, we'll take you to Kenya, where despite never having qualified, football fans are preparing for the world's biggest sporting event. Almost 2 weeks after Ethiopia agreed to lift a blockade in its northern Tigray region, humanitarian organisations are yet to reach millions facing famine and disease. The war-torn region is in desperate need of food, medicine, fuel and more, with the World Health Organization calling for more to be done. Vivian Wandera has more from Nairobi.
Days after Ethiopia's government and Tigrayan rebels agreed to facilitate immediate humanitarian access for all in need in Tigray, aid services are yet to resume in the region. According to a source we spoke to at the United Nations, they are ready to deliver help within 48 hours after they are given the green light and are currently pre-deploying help services for them to move faster once they have the go-ahead. The source added that the first help to be delivered will be food, and that they are currently working with Ethiopia's government and the TPLF for them to gain access into the Tigray region, and so far, progress has been made. International humanitarian agencies have also said that they are ready to provide aid services, but had not been granted access into the region, allegations which Ethiopia's government has strongly denied. Ethiopia's government and the Tigray People Liberation Front, under a ceasefire agreement signed on November 2nd, agreed to work with humanitarian agencies to speed up the provision of aid. The United States and the United Nations have both called on Addis Ababa to respect the peace agreement and allow access of aid for more than 5 million people in need. Despite the peace agreement, the TPLF has accused Ethiopia's government of continuing to carry out targeted attacks in different areas in Tigray, allegations which Addis Ababa has strongly denied.
Vivian Wandera for us there in Nairobi. Well, this year's COP27 climate summit in Egypt is now into its second week. Delegates are set to discuss a loss and damage fund this week before a vote at the end of the summit. But Monday was Gender Day at COP27. The fact is that women form the majority of the world's 1.9 billion people who live in poverty, and they disproportionately suffer the effects of climate change. International NGO Action Aid recently released a report that states women from rural communities in the global south are experiencing the worst impacts of the climate crisis, as well as the greatest losses and damages. Well, Susan Otenio is Executive Director for Action Aid International Kenya. She joins me now live from Nairobi. Susan, thank you so much for being with us here on France 24. Let's start with the big question, shall we? How and why are women being disproportionately affected by climate change?
Thank you so much. So women and girls are actually disproportionately affected. In that with the drought, almost 90% of the open water sources are dried up and they're depleted. And this is seen as more of a gender role, that it's the women, it's the girls who would then ideally be out there looking for water. They have to do long distances and come back home with probably 20 liters of water. We're now seeing girls also being pulled out of school to be able to accompany their parents and also the mothers to go and at least increase on the 20 liters that they are able to come back with. And so these are the increased effects. And also with that, they have to walk long distances, risking violence, attack, rape as they go, and areas that are also close to the wild animals. We've seen women and girls being attacked. And lastly, of course, in a patriarchal society like the societies that are affected, the responsibility to provide is with the men, but you can see there's nothing to bring home. And at the moment you ask for food, and you're asking it from a partner who is already going through depression because of loss of livestock, and then you find that through that then there's also domestic violence that occurs, and mostly it's the women who suffer this.
I want to touch on that. I want to touch on that if you don't mind. Your organisation ActionAid just released a report saying that women aren't just suffering the direct effects of climate change, but also the indirect effects, like gender-based violence, as you just said. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the report brought out the soaring prices of food, and with the income that a woman would be able to probably provide for the family, it's no longer happening. And also when you go to the markets are distorted, and the violence is coming in because of the kind of terrain that they have to walk long distances going to get this water. To some extent, when they find the water, especially when it's commercially being distributed, we've had cases where the distributors are also asking for sex before they can, you can even buy water. So you have money, but you have to trade in your body for you to get the water. And lastly, of course, as I said, their spouses who are going through depression because of loss of livestock. And livestock is a source of dignity for majority of these communities that we are seeing being affected by the drought. So instances where you have to ask for money where there's no money, then it builds into tension. And at the end of it, then you find that women get to suffer violence in the home, domestic violence especially. Yeah.
Susan, what do you think needs to be done to address these issues then? Are they something individual governments need to rectify, or is it a bigger problem than that?
There's a bigger problem. Individual governments, especially governments in the south, have tried, because we know drought would come, and within a season it would be back. We would be back having the rains. But because of the prolonged nature of this disaster, you realize that it's really not just the normal occurrence. And when you dig deep, you find that it's truly related to climate change and its impact, and the shocks, the climate shocks, and the aftermath that is happening. And so we are actually saying that we have to go deeper to the root causes. And the root cause here being the climate shocks, and the people being affected are the women and girls. Then it is important that everyone looks into their responsibility, the causes of the injustices that have happened over and over, that is causing a place like the Horn of Africa to have 4 failed rain seasons, and we are getting into the 5th one. I mean, the little rain that we got, you cannot count. So it's clearly linked to the damages that are being caused by the climate injustices, and therefore it's beyond the countries. This is a global crisis, and that is why we are actually where we are at the moment with the COP27 saying, listen, the women and the girls are suffering, and the root cause to all this climate injustice.
Okay, yes. Susan Etenyo, thank you so much for joining us there here on France 24. Susan Etenyo from ActionAid International, Kenya. Well, elsewhere, unrest reared its head in eastern DR Congo on Monday as government troops traded heavy fire with fighters from the Tutsi-majority M23 militia, prompting hundreds to flee for safety. The clashes occurred around 20 kilometers north of the strategic city of Goma in North Kivu province. The M23 group shot to prominence in 2012 when it captured Goma before it was driven out and went to ground. There's been a resurgence of violence, however, in recent months, with Kinshasa accusing neighbouring Rwanda of supplying arms to the rebel group, a charge Rwanda denies. Over the weekend, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa brushed aside renewed calls for him to quit following the so-called Farmgate scandal. The president is accused of kidnapping, bribery, and acting unlawfully after allegedly the pursuit of suspects who reportedly stole $4 million from a farm he owns back in February 2020. Ramaphosa denies any wrongdoing, but on Monday, his spokesperson said the 69-year-old would stand down if he was charged in the ongoing probe, whilst reiterating that no criminal charges had been brought against the president. And finally, the FIFA World Cup is now less than a week away. Anticipation is building, even in Kenya, where the national team has never qualified for the tournament. Caroline Lamberley tells us more.
Kenya has never made it to a World Cup, but football fans in the capital Nairobi are still looking forward to the competition. Screens have already been set up around the country so that millions can watch the games. Many are hoping that another African nation will win the trophy.
I mean, the World Cup is a really big thing. It's a good thing to Africans and to everyone in the world. We look forward to the games. It happens once in 4 years, and we have a chance to watch the big players. I mean, Kenya may not be going to the World Cup. We're looking forward to watching Senegal, Morocco, Tunisia, Ghana, and Cameroon. We are still hoping that one of the African nations can probably do well in the World Cup, but I think the excitement, the build-up, the pomp and color, the fans, they're the things that make the World Cup special.
Some are rooting for Ghana, while others are placing their bets on Senegal, the current African champions.
Senegal, I feel, overall has a very good chemistry as a team. I mean, they are the African champions to start with. They have a good goalkeeper, they have a good defense, they have a good midfield, they have a good attack. So I think for them, in Africa, I expect them to go farthest.
The Senegalese team arrived in Qatar in the early hours of Monday morning, seemingly without star player Sadio Mane, who's been injured. Coach Aliou Cissé has said he was confident that Mane could recover in time to play. For the first time, the Cup will take place in November and December to avoid the extreme summer heat of the Gulf. The lead up to the tournament has not been without controversy. Host nation Qatar facing scrutiny over the environment and treatment of migrant workers. Dozens may have died from heat stroke, according to Amnesty International.
Well, that's it for this edition. Stay tuned to France 24. There's more news coming up shortly.
यहाँ से ये जो आप सारी साइडें देख रही हैं सर, ये शहर था, एक आबादी थी, इसमें लोगों के कच्चे मकान भी थे, पक्के मकान भी थे, सड़कें थी, बाजार थे, लोगों की फसलें थी बहुत ज़्यादा यहाँ पे। तो पिछले 2 महीने से ये पानी जो है अब समंदर का मंजर पेश कर रहा है।
Pakistan is one of the countries most impacted by global warming. After the heatwave last May, torrential rains hit the country. Natural disasters that are exacerbating Pakistan's rampant poverty and spreading the risk of disease. Pakistan produces less than 1% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, but is among the hardest hit by natural disasters linked to climate change. Unable to cope, Pakistan's authorities demand rich countries pay for the loss and damage they have caused. While the COP27 takes place in Egypt, discussions will address the critical point of loss and damage. Don't miss our latest edition of Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.